Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey. And there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 436. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another exciting guest. Today, I'm talking with Tori Joy Geiger about how to have outdoor adventures when you've got a chronic illness. So I'm really excited to introduce this week's guest. Tori has experienced chronic illness from birth, and that has affected her ability to be an athlete and have outdoor adventures. But it hasn't stopped her at all. She has learned how to work with her body so that she can have all the experiences she wants at her own pace and in her own way. This was really such a delightful conversation. Tori has gone on a journey of self-knowledge, and she has done loads of mindset work, and everything that she has done has gotten her to a place where she can do the things she wants in a way that works for her. Now, whether you have a chronic illness or not, or other life challenges, I know you'll get something out of this episode. So, who is Tori Joy Geiger? Tori is a congenital heart defect survivor and has undergone multiple open heart surgeries and procedures throughout her life. Growing up, she was an avid athlete, participating in volleyball, basketball, and track in high school. She went on to play volleyball at Corban University and later joined the track team at George Fox University as a high jumper. With a heart for others, affected by chronic illnesses such as CHD, Tori started a lifestyle blog where she shares lifestyle and chronic illness tips. Part of her mission is to have a heart that beats for others and to help other chronic illness warriors achieve a life of fulfillment and impact. Tori does this through her 50-50 CHD promise. 50% of her blogging commissions are donated to CHD organizations. When Tori is not blogging or running her businesses, she loves traveling, cooking with her hubby, running, playing with her adorable golden doodle, and paddleboarding. So, what are you going to learn in this week's episode? We talk about how Tori's chronic illness has affected her adventures, how she's been able to move beyond the limitations of her chronic illness, how you can turn why me into opportunity, why it's so important to know who you are at your core, how Tori has overcome medical trauma, how people with chronic illness can have more adventure in their life while still managing their health. You'll also learn the mindset that can help people overcome adversity and live life to their fullness. Finally, you'll learn Tori's top tips for living victoriously with a chronic illness. But before we get into today's episode, I wanted to have a word with our sponsor. The sponsor is me. I am going to be sharing some of the things that I've got on offer on this podcast. So ever since I published my 2019 book, If Trees Could Talk, people have been asking me for help with tree communication. Readers want to learn how to do it themselves. Now, I've been slowly working on a new book that's all about tree communication. I meant to have it done by the end of this year, but that's clearly not going to happen. So I've created an online course to help you get started communicating with trees and plants. In the past, when I've done online courses, I have thrown in everything but the kitchen sink, making them totally overwhelming for people. That's why I've kept this one short and simple so that you can get started right away. But rest assured that you will learn everything you need to know and you'll be able to ask me questions if you run into any trouble. The course is a series of short videos, but because I know that not everyone has time to sit down and watch a video series, I'm also including it as an audio file so you can take it on the go. Are you not an auditory learner? That's fine. I've got you covered with transcripts. Now, I'm keeping the introductory price super low for now, but as I add more to the course, the price will go up. You can get it now for $47. You can learn more and sign up here at hollywharton.com/secrets, and feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. Now, without further ado, let's get into this week's episode with Tori. Hi, Tori. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Holly?
Good. Thank you. So I'm excited to talk to you today about how to have outdoor adventures when you've got a chronic illness, because I know some of my listeners that they've got chronic illness and they've not been able to do all the things that they want to do, and it's frustrating. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, likewise. I think outdoor adventures have been a huge part of just my health overall. I live in Oregon, so
Mm.
there's so much to do here, from hiking to water to the beach to the mountains. There's just so much. And so I think growing up, that's been a huge part of my health and just being outdoors. So I'm excited to share.
Cool. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So my full name, Tori Joy Geiger, and I'm an author and I'm also a business owner. And so my business that I own is a bookkeeping and consulting company. And then
Mm.
I recently just became an author writing about my chronic illness and how you can turn the adversity of a chronic illness into your victory story. My full name is Victoria, technically, and it means victory. And
Nice.
so I think that's been a theme in my life. And so I decided to just share my story and give some lessons learned on how to have a victorious life when you're dealt a set of cards that maybe you don't wish that you were dealt.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your chronic illness and what your experience has been?
Yes. So before I was born, I was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect called Ebstein's anomaly. And what that means is the right side of my heart is enlarged and the flaps of my valve don't close all the way. So I have a lot of blood leakage in my heart. It doesn't work as efficiently. My oxygen levels are a lot different than other people. And then more recently, when I was in middle school and high school, I was diagnosed with supraventricular tachycardia, which is
Oh.
really common with my already existing heart condition. And so that was kind of more when my chronic illness really got real for me in those teenage years. And I was actually ambulanced from a basketball game and defibrillated 3 times because supraventricular tachycardia, what it is it speeds up your heart. So your heart would be beating at 200 beats per minute just sitting and it wasn't good.
Yeah.
And so I did have surgery to fix it, but those are the big ones I've lived with my entire life and have learned to navigate life through.
So how has it affected your life? Like, what have the limitations been?
Yeah, definitely sports I was able to do. I was an athlete growing up, but there were definitely times I had to stop. I would say as a business owner today, I would say I get fatigued a
Mm.
lot more. My heart isn't as efficient. So I think I have to take a little bit more rest and I have to be a lot more cognizant of stress and the things that I'm putting on my heart just because I might need a valve replacement in the future. I did have open heart surgery when I was 4 days old,
Wow.
2 months old, and then 7 months old.
Wow.
So I've had my fair share of surgeries at a young age, and I'm hoping I don't have to have really any more. And so those are things I have to just be really cautious of. If my heart starts having funky rhythms, I have to stop. Certain drinks, like I remember growing up Gatorade, for
Ooh.
some reason, couldn't have it.
Mm.
It would really affect. So there was just little things like that. And then as an athlete, if there was drills like short sprint drills, I would have to pull myself out. Especially like with outdoor adventures, I have to be cognizant of elevation. There's sometimes I'm like, I have to just stop, get my breath, because elevation will sometimes really mess with my heart.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like you've had to be really kind of aware of your body and in touch with your body and in touch with your needs and your need for rest, especially.
Definitely. And I think growing up, I wasn't always great at that, of knowing when to rest and when to stop. But as I've gotten older, I've learned a lot about my body and it's helped me.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because, as you get older, you know yourself better, you know your body better, you know what's going on. You're just more in
Yeah.
tune with yourself, usually.
Usually. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, how have you been able to move beyond the limitations of your chronic illness and your heart issues?
I think for me, a lot of it was mindset work of
Mm.
understanding, like, yes, this is my life, but it doesn't define what I'm capable of. And so, yes, there's going to be limitations. Yes, I might not be the fastest hiker or the fastest runner, but that's okay. And I can still enjoy life in other parts. And I think when I switched gears, I think growing up, that wasn't always my mindset. And then when I started going through things more in middle school and high school, and I started learning those lessons of this doesn't define me. It actually empowers me to do even more and to be more in my life because I've gone through that adversity and I can share that with others. But I think when I switch that frame of mind of it doesn't define me, it's something that I can use to help others. And I just have to know my limits. And that's just the way I'm going to live my life.
Yeah. So you mentioned you did mindset work. What kind of mindset work did you do? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it started with reading some really rich books of just learning like what is a success mindset? What is a healthy success mindset too? Because there's a difference. And then I think forming good mental habits. And I think a lot of that was through affirmations. I did a lot of those types of work. I do a lot of, I would say, quiet time or meditation times of just really being alone with my thoughts, and journaling is super therapeutic for me. And so I think through those practices, I was really able to understand where my value comes from too. And so I think that mindset work started with those practices and just has grown over time.
That's excellent. So do you remember what books you read that most had an effect?
Yeah. I think one of them was my first book I read was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is the
Yeah.
most generic. But there were definitely some lessons that opened up my mind of just, okay, like seeing the world just a little bit different. Like the world isn't revolved around my adversity. Like it's not, all about me, and just being able to also focus on others. I think that was a big part. I mean, for me, my faith is important. So the Bible is an effective book for me too.
Mm.
But I would say a lot of Mark Batterson books I've read that have been really helpful to just looking at my adversity. I would say John Maxwell has been huge for me too. Just knowing what does growth look like.
Yeah.
So those have been huge books for me.
So you're a runner and a paddleboarder. How has your chronic illness affected your adventures in that?
Yeah, I actually ran a half marathon this last year, and
Yay!
that was huge for me because I, growing up, was not a long distance runner whatsoever. But running actually has become something that's really therapeutic for me. It's the
Ooh.
mental clarity is just amazing. And so my sister-in-law is really great runner. So she partnered with me and helped train me so I wasn't by myself. It was slow
Yeah.
training. We did some trail runs and
Nice.
I'm very slow,
Yep.
but I did it.
Good.
And I think there were times I did have to stop. On my actual half marathon, I didn't, but just in the training, I would have to every once in a while just walk and just regain if I felt a weird flip-flop heartbeat. And I was okay with that. And that was my journey. So running, that's been my running journey. Paddleboarding is like my escape. I
Nice.
love it. I could just sit out on the water for hours. It's my peacefulness right there. Is just, I could be having the worst day ever. And I live near the Willamette River in Oregon. And so we just take our paddle boards out to the Willamette and just ride, and everything was calm. It changes the whole day. I love it.
Nice. Yeah, I can imagine it's very peaceful. And I've never done paddleboarding, but I imagine that also really gets you in tune with your body because you've obviously got to balance on the thing. So you've
Oh
got to be really aware of where you are with the board and the water and what you're doing with your body. And
oh yes.
yeah.
And definitely I think there's some bodies of water that are more peaceful than others,
Yeah.
especially if there are some boats or there's more of a current. In some of them, you have to be very aware. And I've never fallen off. That's one thing I
No.
haven't yet. But it's just so peaceful. And it's great when we go camping, when we go other places, because we have actually blow up paddle boards. We can wherever we go. It's been fun to travel and go to different places and paddleboard.
Nice. So, how do you think people with chronic illness can have more adventure in their life while still managing their health and well being?
I think it first starts with just getting outside. I think we tend to just stay in our little bubble. And I think when you get out into nature, and whether that's a hike or it's just like a walk through a park, I think just starting somewhere with your comfort level. You don't have to be going and hiking mountains the first thing you do. But I think that you can start small, and just being outside in the fresh air. Oh my gosh, like it changes your day. And I know that for me, my stress levels are so much better when I've taken the time to be outside. And so I would say just start somewhere. And even if that's super small, start there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's so easy for us to compare ourselves to other people and like, oh, she's doing this and he's doing that. But like, You got to start somewhere. So start with what you can do, and then maybe you can work your way up to where they are and maybe beyond.
Exactly. I think I used to be so defeated by watching other people go on these hikes.
Mm.
Like we have South Sister is a big one here in our state that I've always wanted to do. And it took a lot of time. We went with my husband and some friends, and we had to stop every so often because of the elevation, but we
Mm.
made it. And I think earlier me would have been super frustrated and embarrassed
Yeah.
that that was my limitation. But now, kind of coming through and doing some of that mindset work, doing some of that just inner work has really helped me to be able and be confident, like, that's just the way it goes. And I'm going to enjoy the hike no matter what.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's probably a really good lesson for working with your ego because, as you say, it kind of brings up your stuff around your limitations. But
yeah.
if you're self-aware, you can work through that stuff.
Yes. It all starts with being self aware. And I think when you know yourself so well, that is mental resilience, that is mental toughness. I used to think growing up, especially as an athlete, oh, I have to pull myself out of drills. They're going to think that I'm not mentally tough, like I can't
Mm.
hack it. And I think I learned over the years that no, like mental toughness is knowing yourself so well that you do know your limits and you know when to step out. Because
Ex-
people that aren't power through and they harm themselves.
Exactly. They can end up injured or burned out or overtraining syndrome or who knows what.
Yeah.
So, what all have you learned about yourself through your outdoor adventures?
I would say I've learned even more my need for rest. I didn't realize how important it was and how integral it was to who I am to be the best I can be for others. And I think nature has really helped me know that I need to reset. I need to rest and know that's a part of me and be okay with that. I think it's also helped me get my priorities right too, of knowing like what really matters and what doesn't. And that's really helped in life.
Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson to learn is because rest, because so many of us like push, 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 hustle, 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 train, 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 do all the things, and then we burn out. But
Yeah.
if you're aware of your needs for rest and you're aware of the approaching burnout, you can manage your energy before you get to that burnout place.
One time before I was traveling, we got to travel abroad for a class that I was in college. And our teacher did this thing where he's like, I want you to journal like what you need to be at 100% during this trip, whether that's you need to make sure you're getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep, you need to make sure you're doing this, that. And I think that was like, oh, I need to just do that for life. Like, and look at like, what do I need to be at my best? So if I know I have a busy week coming up, if I know I have certain things, making sure I'm making the priority to make sure I'm resting and doing those things. So I'm still maintaining a balance and a healthy me and not going to get into burnout. That's been helpful.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And how do you think you've grown as a person through your outdoor adventures and through your challenges?
I think I've grown in my confidence in
Mm.
myself, my confidence to improve too, because I've seen over the years, like running a half marathon, that would be something I never would have done years ago. And to have the confidence of I did that, like I was
Yeah.
able to do that. And then also the confidence of coming through, not seeing my limitation is not a weakness, but knowing myself. And I think gaining confidence in knowing myself that has been huge for me of just knowing, yeah, I might not be in nature, but take that into the workforce. And I'm just like, I need rest. I know myself so well. So I have that confidence that
Mm.
this or is this like, I think prior I might have maybe questioned myself a little bit more. Whereas I feel like I have a lot more confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about mindset, and I love mindset. Like I love talking about mindsets. I can talk about it all day long. What mindset do you think people need to overcome adversity and live their life to the fullest?
My biggest mindset shift I think that I've seen and I've tried to help others with is that why me
Yeah.
question. I think when we go through adversity, that's the first question. That's like the question that can also just weigh us down. And one of the things, the mindset that's been the biggest for me is turning why me into opportunity and turning that adversity into a way that I can love and bless others. I think there's a time to process the emotions you're going through and to validate those, but there's also a time to step out and turn that why me into a way to bless others. Yeah, I think that that is the biggest thing that's been the change for me
And how do
is
you do that? That's super challenging. I think a lot of
yeah,
people just get so stuck in that downward spiral of like, oh, why me? My life is terrible.
yeah. Honestly, for me, it's been through writing. And I know not everybody writes in journals, but for me, I started literally writing out like, who am I? Like, who am I at my core? And I think that's huge to identify. Like, I'm not, I was a volleyball player, track athlete in college, and that's not my identity though. And
Mm.
that can go away. And so I think identifying who you are at your core of I'm kind, I'm a friend, I'm compassionate, I'm empathetic. Like those are who you are at your core. And so when you do go through adversity and your identity or what your life looked like changes, who you are doesn't change. And so I think if you do a good job of journaling or really identifying this is who I am and separating that from all the different roles that you play in life, I think that's when there's a lot of freedom. You're staying who you are through it all. That's been huge. And I think I journal a lot about what I'm learning. I went through a period, I'm still growing of I don't like IVs because of some traumatic, events that I've gone through. I journal a lot about, okay, how can I grow in that? Or what are lessons I'm learning? I'm learning to be a better advocate for myself with doctors.
Mm.
I'm learning to be able to advocate for others. So I think taking those experiences and kind of really diving into what am I learning? Who am I? Those have been huge ways for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like this has just all been such a journey of just self-knowledge, which is so, so important.
It is. I don't think I realized the importance of it until I reached probably end of high school, beginning of college, when my identity was really shaken during those
Mm.
times of my life because of the medical trauma I was going through. And I remember just thinking, this isn't my story. Like this shouldn't be my story. And I think I finally owned my story
Mm.
and this is the life that I've been given, but I also have the opportunity to turn these circumstances into something even more better and impactful. And I think it started with knowing and rediscovering who I was.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned medical trauma. Do you feel like you've had to do any kind of healing to overcome that?
Yeah, I was in therapy when I was in high school, and I actually went back into therapy this last year because I started getting such bad flashbacks
Mm.
from especially that medical trauma that I had in high school when I was ambulanced from a basketball game. I mean, back in high school, when I would hear an ambulance, I would basically shake after that experience. And so I had to work through a lot of that. And then when I was writing my book this last year, I was reliving a lot of the trauma
Mm.
and so I went back into therapy. I did a lot of EMDR with
Mm.
my therapist and just uncovered a lot of things that were attached to that medical trauma. And so that was really, really helpful to work through a lot of those things.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. Sometimes it takes lots of work to clear trauma, so it's good that you're getting started on that journey.
Definitely. And I remember talking to my parents, they said the doctor's like, well, she won't remember anything, when she was little, like when she was a baby. And my mom she goes, I don't believe that. I think there were times I'd come into your room when you were crying and it
Mhm.
sounded like you were just scared. Like
Yeah.
it was a different cry. And she goes, I think there was trauma and there. And so that working through that has been a journey for my life. So
Yeah, I can
yeah.
imagine. So let's talk a little bit about your book. It's called From Vulnerable to Victorious: Turning Your Chronic Illness into Your Victory Story. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So this book is targeted at individuals that have chronic illness. It's for general adversity. I think anybody could benefit from the principles in it. But my heart goes out to those that are affected by chronic illness and just it walks you through, it tells my story of kind of living with a chronic illness and some of the events that I've gone through. But alongside that story, it talks about kind of the lessons and the framework that I've used to really turn my mindset with my chronic illness and be able to share my victory story. Because I believe everyone has a victory story and they have a way to be able to impact other people's lives. And people need to hear your story. And so I kind of in this book give a framework of how you change your mindset on your chronic illness and tools. There's lots of affirmations. There's lots of exercises to do at the end of each chapter. And then at the very end, it's just a prompting to now's your time to write your story and share your story because there's so much power in that. So that's basically the gist of the book.
Nice. Now, were you afraid at all to tell your story? Because I'm an author and I work with authors, and I know so many people that want to tell their story, but they're like, oh, but does anyone want to read it? Are they interested? Are they going to say, who do I think I am? Like, that brings up a lot of stuff for people.
Totally. I dealt with such imposter syndrome.
Mm.
I'm 24 years old. And so I was thinking in the back of my head, who wants to hear? Like, I haven't lived as long as other people, but I have gone through a lot of things that most people haven't gone through at the age that I did. And so I actually had a traditional published author. I met with her after college and I asked her, I said, okay, where do I go to get an editor? And I was just asking her questions. And she just looks at me and she goes, well, who would want to pick up your story? Like, who would want to? And I was like, oh. And so I think for a little while, that was what I believed for a little bit. And it took me a while to then eventually be like, no, like I have a way, like there are things I've gone through, others haven't, or they have, but I have a perspective that they need to hear. And so I just started writing and I really started connecting with people on social media that had chronic illness and they started asking me questions and things. And so that gave me a lot of confidence, I think, to continue. And once the book got published, it's just been amazing. Just the messages I've gotten from other people with chronic illness, they're like, yes, like you get what I'm going through. And now I see myself in a different light though. And so it's just been like, oh, yes, like that's the whole goal. I mean, if one person was impacted by this book, it's a win. So I think just hearing people's feedback in just the communities I'm in has been amazing. And it's been the biggest blessing. It's a dream come true, honestly, to do that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what are your top tips for living victoriously, for having adventures with a chronic illness?
Yeah, I think first it's owning your story. I think that's the number one thing is you have to do that in order to live victoriously. Don't deny it. And I think it's validate your emotions. So don't try to stifle them. It's a real part of the journey. And so I think finding ways to work through those emotions. And for me, that's being out in nature where I have my most peace. And as I'm dealing through things, I want to be in that environment. And so I think it's knowing yourself. And so you're able to validate those emotions. I would say, so I guess those would be my top three is knowing yourself, validating your emotions, and owning your story is just the biggest tips I have for anybody living with a chronic illness.
What does victoriously mean to you?
Yeah. Living a victorious life means getting back up every single time that you fall back down and using what I'm going through, the good and the bad, to help others and show kindness and love to others. That's what living a victorious life. And that's the legacy that I want to live and leave on the earth with my life is a victorious legacy.
I love it. So do you have any more tips for people? Anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
I think the last thing would just be try new things.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to outdoor adventure. Just be willing to try it. Might not be your thing, but I mean, I went snowboarding this last year and it was an adventure. I'm going to try it again this winter. I don't know if I'll stick with it, but I'm at least trying it. And so I think just being open to trying things is huge.
And also experimenting because, you know, you might think you can't do something, but you don't really know until you try.
Exactly. And I think you might pick up something that you love that you didn't realize that would be something that you would enjoy. And so I think there's a lot of things out there you can try and it's an adventure. You get to learn more about yourself through trying new things too. So there's no harm in trying something new.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Tori, where can people find you online and learn more about what you do?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at Tori Joy Geiger, or you can find me on my website at torijoygeiger.com. And then you can purchase the book on Amazon. That's the main place that you can go to get the ebook or the paperback or the hardback. And there's also a Facebook group, and it is called the TJG Victory Tribe. So it's for specifically women that have chronic illness, and it's just a way for us to support and encourage one another.
Community is really, really important with all of life's challenges. But like when you have kind of a specific niche challenge like chronic illness, I think it's going to be really great to have support from other people.
Definitely. And you have people that understand what you're going through and they can offer a perspective for you, which is great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. If you enjoyed this episode, you might enjoy one of these related episodes. Episode 418 is where I talk about adventures in rest. Episode 340 is with Esther Lemons. We talk about how to connect with your body's innate wisdom. 324 is a solo show where I talk about how to keep overwhelm from becoming burnout. 315, I talk about how to know yourself and how to answer the question, who am I? Finally, episode 293, I talk about how to get back on track and get shit done after illness or burnout. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/436 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.